Well, I'm back up in the stand again, kind of just going through the motions of deer season at this point, trying to finish out the season strong. We've got a week left here in Indiana. It's week 13, week 14, whatever the last couple of weeks are for your state's deer season. Usually comes down to one thing, and that's filling the freezer up and late season doe management. In the last episode, week 12, we were talking about the I-wish period of deer season, being that we had the cold temperatures, but we lacked the preparation, and it comes down to that for a lot of people. They lack the preparation, they lack putting in those food plots specifically for the late season, or they just simply lack the scouting or figuring out what mature bucks were on the property and their patterns before those cold temperatures got there. So we're kind of still in that I-wish period, because at this point all we can do is fill up the freezer and go ahead and invest into next year. This is a property with a bunch of 3-year-olds on it we've had several encounters with, and they're going to be great bucks next year. We had a couple of 4-year-olds passing through, and if they return that same time next year, if we put in the food plots, we put in the time, then we could definitely reap the benefits. But a part of that is going ahead and doing some late season doe management on this property. Go ahead and take a couple of does off this property in order to relieve some of the pressure that we're going to have on those food plots when we put them in. So we want to have a couple of kill plots. We want to have a 2-acre bean field that we want for standing beans in specific locations next to bedding areas that we know bucks are at. In order to do that, we have to reduce the doe population on this property, and it often comes down to that for a lot of property owners and a lot of deer hunters that are definitely looking and pushing their sights towards next year. The trick is with the late season, especially if you're trying to kill a bunch of does, is you really got to watch for 2 things, and it often comes down to having a lone deer out in a food plot or a lone deer out in a late season food source. You really don't have a lot of deer to compare their body size to, and you got to watch out for 1, if it's a button buck, or 2, if it's a buck that's actually shed its antlers already. In some instances, you have bucks that have already cast their antlers off, and in many instances, especially if it's a deer alone out there, it could definitely be a button buck. You can start getting into those low light conditions of a late season hunt. It's a cloudy day, you've got snow, you've got rain, you've got whatever. It's tricky, and you really got to watch and make sure that you're not shooting a button buck, or you're not shooting your 4 or 5-year-old that has obviously lost its antlers, and that would be a real painful scenario, obviously. But at this point in the season, if you don't have a mature buck to go after, you don't have late season food source that you're really targeting, you really don't have your sights set on a buck that you're going after, and you've put a lot of time in already, at this point it's smarter to go ahead and start investing into next season, rather than just kind of holding off from shooting does. Just if you know you gotta shoot some does, which typically often happens right now because you have a lot of does you have a lot of deer on your property, start utilizing one area of the property, and that really gives you a sense of how many deer you're actually dealing with, and that can kind of scare people and jumpstart the whole late season doe management part of the hunt. That plus filling the freezer. So at this point, go ahead and start investing into next year. That's what we're doing. And actually next week is probably going to be our last episode, and we're kind of going to give you some insight into what we're going to do in the postseason, how we're going to handle the off season, and maybe some content that you could run across that might help you in terms of your off season and investing into next year.